inshallah you can do so by going and visiting our website, masjidalwislam.org. Inshallah, the names will not be there, it will be anonymous. You can ask questions, you may have anything you want to ask. If it's not covered during the presentation, inshallah, the doctor will receive those questionnaires, inshallah will answer your questions at the end of the program. Jazakallah.
Who run this masjid for allowing me to share this conversation with you about well-being, and hopefully, inshallah, it will bring benefit to you and your family as well. So Maulana made a really good point, much more eloquent than what I said last week. If you are physically, mentally in a good place, if you're physically strong, psychologically you're strong, it will show up in your religion. And that's why this conversation's ever so important. So what we're going to do is, we're going to, over the next 45 minutes inshallah, and then I'll open it up for questions at the end. We're going to talk about just a brief synopsis of current status quo. Everything okay, Wes? Everything okay? Yeah. About the status quo of just where we are with mental health in this country. I'm going to talk you through how to recognize common mental health illnesses, how to help yourself. So I'll say that again, how to help yourself. That's really important. And then also a little bit on strengthening faith at the end, inshallah. So if you are struggling or suffering from a mental health problem, you're not alone. There's, as of 2 weeks ago, there's 8 billion people on this planet now, mashallah, and 1 billion in any given time suffer from some form of mental health illness. So this is catastrophic, this is massive, okay? And for those of you that suffer from any mental health problem, you'll probably vouch with what I'm going to say next, is that it is just as debilitating as having any physical illness. You ask anybody, or if you're going through it, they'll tell you, when you suffer from depression, anxiety, bipolar, schizophrenia, any mental health type of illness, it is really debilitating and just as disabling as having any other physical condition. And in the UK, 1 in 5 adults and 1 in 10 children suffer from one form of mental health illness or not. In the Muslim community, it's 1 in 4. This is my own guess. I think it's more because we don't acknowledge. I'll explain why that's the case in a second. Believe it or not, 70% of mental health illnesses actually stem from childhood. It's just not picked up, or it's not acknowledged, especially in our community. And this is the tragic statistics, okay? It's just so sad when you read this. It brings tears to your soul. 2020, this is end of 2020. It wasn't COVID that was the biggest killer. It was suicide. That's just awful, isn't it? This is in this country. So between the ages of 5 years old and 34 years old, the leading cause of death was suicide. It wasn't COVID. And the third and fourth, you can see the slides in those respective age groups. So it's a massive, massive problem. And what happened when the pandemic happened, it just compounded the problem. And we at work, we have an annual away day, and we were talking about how the past couple of years has been really, really hard. And one of our colleagues, he does the IT in our practice, and he was saying that it's just been a really abnormal year for a human being. Like, no generation has had to put up with a complete lockdown, homeschooling, loss of jobs, loss of finances, uncertainty of the future, fear of illness, living through a pandemic, and so forth. It's just been really, really hard for a lot of people, and it just completely compounded the problem and made mental health even worse. So that didn't help, and it's still ongoing. With the cost of living, the uncertainty about a pending World War III because of what's going on in the world. There's quite a lot that you have to deal with in your head, and it's still there. Our biggest hurdle, when I say our, so I give a lot of these talks in masajids and to the BAME community, black, Asian, ethnic minority, who might not necessarily be Muslim. So when I say our, I mean the BAME community, because it's the same in Afro-Caribbean as well, and also Chinese, Japanese, South Korean communities. But for us especially, there's a massive, massive hurdle. It's called shame and sharam. What does that mean? Why is this a problem? People don't talk about it because because of sharam. So there was a study done, this is on the back of a study in London, in a really dense, if I remember correctly, Asian population, it's specifically Bengali. And they asked the question, so doctors asked the question, why is it that they don't go to the doctor for mental health problems? So they surveyed the Muslims in this community. And number one was the causes were misunderstood. So just have a wild guess. What was the top cause of mental health illnesses in this Muslim community? No. No. Top cause of why someone ends up with a mental health problem. No. No. And you're going to laugh at what I'm going to say. Jinn. The reason why people, you'd laugh, the reason why people suffer from this is what this study showed. That right at the top, people genuinely believe that this person has got a mental health problem because there's a jinn inside them. Or someone's done jadoo. Like, we believe in jinn. The Imam, mashallah, beautifully read Surah Rahman, Allah is addressing the humans and jinn. We believe in jinn, it's a part of our faith. La shak, they exist. We believe in black magic and evil eye and so forth. The Prophet ﷺ warned us about it. That's why we have verses of protection and dua of protection. But this was how the Muslim community, and you'll be shocked how many people actually go for this first. When somebody in the family has a mental health problem, they say, oh, jinn baragi. This person has a jinn, right? So this was right at the top. The second thing they found out was this thing called social pressures to conform. What that means is that, have you ever heard the phrase from our community that when something's not going your way, you just put up with it. You know what I mean, don't you? Just get on with it. Those sort of things don't help. I had 12 kids, I went to work with no shoes, and you might well have done, and love you and respect you for that. But that's not very helpful with what I'm going through right now with my mental health. So there's this thing of just get on with it, because you just have to, okay? The third thing that they found was that people who identified them, who had a mental health problem, they identified that actually they were not valued. That the moment somebody found out that they had a mental health problem, they were shunned or kept away from social events or family events and so forth. So that was another reason they noticed this was happening. And especially for women, marriage proposals was one of the biggest issues. When you and I, when we go look for a wife, and sisters at home, when you go to look for a husband, you should, if you haven't already, you should explain, you should be inside out 100%, this is who I am, what I am. And part of that is explaining if you have a medical condition. If I'm obviously married, but if I was to go and look for a wife, and I tell her, by the way, I have diabetes, and I'm on medication for that, would she still marry me? Would the family still let that girl get married to me, yes or no? The answer is yes, they would. If I said, I suffer from depression, will the family let the girl? No chance. Bilkul no. They would just doesn't happen. This still happens now. So this is a big problem. So they say, it's better I just keep quiet. But then what happens is a brother gets married or sister gets married, and the other one, the husband or the wife, has a mental health problem, and then it comes out. You can only keep up that front for what? How long does the magical honeymoon period last for? 3 months, 6 months? When the going gets tough, that's when true colours come out, and then it's like, oh, God, I can't deal with this. And then marriages separate. Approximately 1 in 3 marriages in the Muslims in Britain now. One of my friends who's a mufti who does a lot of work with divorces. 1 in 3 marriages are now divorced. Allah save us. So this what came out, and again, what came out from this study was one of the biggest problems that we face in our community is backbiting, slandering, and gossiping. We can give a masterclass in this in our communities. How to backbite, how to gossip. And if there's any community that should be at the forefront of exemplars, give an example of how to not backbite, not slander, not gossip, because of the shiddah, the intensity of the hurma of how it's haram. We should be at the forefront, but we're not. We're at the forefront of the complete opposite. And be honest with yourself. Those of you who are here and those of you listening, can you get past a gathering without backbiting? It's virtually impossible now. And the world that we live in now, last week I talked about devices, I'll mention it again. You can now backbite, slander, gossip, and you're on your own by virtue of this thing. And so we just lay into people when they're really suffering. And then what happens is this. Oh, I'm not going with the slide. What happens, sorry Wes. What happens is that people put on a filter. It's much, much easier for me to just pretend that I'm happy, I've got life sussed out, when actually I'm drowning underneath. So right now you can, with your Instagram, Twitter feed, Facebook, whatever is out there, I don't even know because I don't have a smartphone, but whatever's out there, you can now show the world that you're super happy, super busy, super successful, super everything, but actually you're drowning. Because it's much, much easier. And then ultimately what happens is people don't seek help because it's easier. So there's layers to it. Okay, you follow me so far? Yeah? So the key messages that came out of this study, okay, was that, look, mental health problems are common. You've seen it. That, it's 1 in 5. For the Muslim community, it's 1 in 4. And about 10% of those actually are on the suicide, where they want to commit suicide. Allah save us from that. So it's very, very common, and anyone can be affected. Any age, any gender, any race, any socioeconomic status, any profession, you name it. It can affect anybody. Do you know in which profession is the highest suicide rate in this country? No, it's dentists. Yes. I mean, how bizarre is that? Dentists. Highest suicide rate in terms of profession. So it can affect anybody, okay? But this is another key message, is that people do recover. They can recover, and they do recover. And this is what I tell my patients. This is just a blip in your life. Okay? It's just a blip. Work with me, and inshallah, you'll have breakthrough and you won't look back. It's just another chapter in your life. Just like you have seasons in your life. Your life is a story. You have chapters in your life. It's just the way the world is. And so people do recover. And one thing that I add, this is my little masala that I add in, that it's not a sign of weak iman, brothers and sisters, at all. And anybody who says that, send them to me, I'll debate with them till the end of the night why it's not. Our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he went through the most difficult period of his life, I mean, just imagine, right? He, the Quraysh of Makkah were just fed up of what he was doing, and the Sahaba. So they exiled them into the valley of Abi Talib for 3 years. No one could buy and sell. You couldn't get married. No dealings with them. There were times, and this is like really different, just to give you an understanding of what the process, one of the things that he had to go through. Sa'ad ibn Abi Waqqas, one of the first of the Sahaba, the 7th who became Muslim, he said that we were so hungry that we couldn't sleep at night, so we were just pacing up and down this valley, pitch black. There's no, street lights in those days, right? He said, I stood on something that was a bit squidgy. I was so hungry, I just put it in my mouth. He said, to this day, I don't even know what it was. So they were there for 3 years eating leaves, right? Then the boycott is lifted after 3 years. Who passes away? Abu Talib. Who then passes away a few weeks after? Khadija, radiallahu anha. Two of the most beloved people to the Prophet ﷺ. One who was his protector and the other who was his soulmate. He loved her. When Aisha radiallahu asked her about, tell me about Khadija, he just said, kanat hiya kanat. Like, I ain't got time to tell you what she's like. And well, I won't go into that, but he loved her. And the reason why they passed away is because 3 years of starvation, it affected their health. They passed away. What was that year called? Amul Huzn, the year of sadness. In other words, it was acknowledged that the Prophet ﷺ went through a period of deep sadness. Okay, when Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu and the Prophet ﷺ were in the cave, and Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu became scared, and he had a lot of emotions. He became quite like, when they were walking to Medina Munawwara, when they were emigrated to Medina Munawwara, Abu Bakr, and this is the sign of love, He once went to the right-hand side of the Prophet ﷺ, then he anxiously went to the left, then he went to the front, and the Prophet was saying, what are you doing? You're going there, you're going there, you're going there, you're going there, what's up with you? He said, Habibi, he said, I'm worried that someone from the right's going to come and attack you. So then I'm thinking, well, someone from the left's going to come and attack you, and someone from the front's going to come, and he just can't. So he's in the cave, and again, he's anxious. What's going to happen? What verse was revealed at that time? What did the Rasul ﷺ say? And Allah revealed that verse. It said, La tahzan inna Allah ma'ana. Don't grieve. Allah is with you. So Allah acknowledges that human beings have emotions. Okay? And that's why it's not a sign of weak iman. And therefore, the key message that I want to give today is that, look, mental mental illness is nothing to be ashamed of. Number one. And neither is there anything to be ashamed of talking about it. And there should be open conversations. So, before we move on to the bulk of it, I want you to understand something first. Like, you have to understand this bit. Okay, by the time you're 35 years old, 90% of who you are is embedded in you. You are who you are psychologically by the time you're 35 years old. And essentially it's a memorized set of behaviors, emotional reactions, unconscious habits, and basically you're just wired. That's who you are, okay, 90%. And it's because of life experiences, okay? And it literally functions like a computer program. The World Cup's on right now, right? Okay, you don't have to be all pious because you're in the masjid, right? You all watch football, right? We know you do, right? When England are playing and it's penalties, I know you know what your reaction is going to be like if they miss the penalty. Agreed? Because you're hardwired that way by that time, okay? Why is that important? Because what happens is that the other 10% of your mind is saying, I want to be stress-free, happy, I want to be content, I want to have an enjoyable life and so forth. But the brain is following a completely different program. 90% of your brain is following a different program based on what your life experiences are already. Okay? In other words, you follow your default. Okay? You can predict your response based on your life experiences. Okay? Why is that important? Because our entire state in any given time is what we think and what we feel. Right now, the way you're responding to me speaking is dependent on how you're feeling and how you're thinking based on now, okay? But what controls your thoughts more long term is your worldview. And I'll give you an example of what this means. Do you know anybody who's permanently angry? No matter what, whenever you see them, they're always angry. Do you know people, have you ever met anybody like that? I have. There's nothing to be angry about and they get angry, agreed? And you're like, what's up with you, man? There's some people, right, no matter what, there's something to moan about. They're permanent moaners. You know people like that? Yeah. There are people, no matter what, they're always happy. And you just think, wow, no matter what, you're always happy. You always see the good in everything. Okay? That's their story. That's their worldview. Okay? So what governs you in any moment is how you're thinking and feeling, depending on how your day's been. But what governs you more long term is literally your life experiences, your 90%. And everybody has their own story, basically. Now, why is this important? Because if you've experienced difficulty in your life, which is normal, which a lot of people go through, but you're stuck in the past, that's your story, and then that becomes your future as well. Okay, this is really important to understand, and you'll understand why in a second, okay? So you follow me so far where I'm going with this, okay? So, why is this important? Because there are major triggers of mental illnesses, okay? Major triggers. And one of the top two, okay? The top two, and this is where it's really, I have to have really sensitive conversations here, okay? Because I don't want to trigger anybody, because these sort of conversations upset people when they go through these things, okay? So bear with me. One of the top ones is trauma. And trauma is defined as experiencing anything that rocks you. And it can be, well, commonly, we will talk about common things, abuse. Okay? It's really traumatic for anybody. A child cannot understand for the life of them why on earth somebody would hit them, especially their parents. They cannot understand for the life of them why somebody would call them stupid, especially their parents. They cannot understand why, for the life of them, somebody would say you're dumb because you didn't get that A star, especially from their parents. These things are traumatic. So trauma usually triggered from abuse, and abuse is defined as physical abuse, verbal abuse, emotional abuse, financial abuse, which doesn't really happen in children, mainly in adults, and sexual abuse. They're the big five. The other trauma is bereavement. Children can find it really traumatic if somebody really close to them passes away, especially at a young age. Think grandparents, uncles, aunties, brothers, sisters, and so forth. Really, really traumatic. And the third thing, they witness something traumatic. Like, they're walking home from school, and look, we have to have open conversations. Knife crime is big. It's really traumatic for a child to witness somebody get stabbed or beat up or this and that. They can't grasp what happens to them. And then that compounds if parents, caregivers don't calibrate, don't make sense of this chaos that they're going through. If they just say, just get on with it. It makes it 10 times worse. That's number one. Number two is family relationships. Children cannot understand, and this is where, maybe I have to speak a bit strongly, but children cannot for the life of them understand why mum and dad are at each other's throats. They don't get it. They can't take it. It really, really troubles them. You, as parents, are their everything. And they cannot work out why you're both arguing all the time, why you're shouting at each other, why you're dissing each other, why you're cursing each other, why you're swearing at each other, and why you're hitting each other. They can't grasp what's going on. It's really, really traumatic for them. I'm telling you, and parents here, and those who are listening at home, and parents to be, never ever have an argument with your other half in front of your kids. Kabini. You're adults, for God's sake. They don't need to hear it. Control yourself. Don't ever say anything nasty about your wife, and sisters listening at home, about your husband. Ever. You shouldn't do it anyway. But don't ever do it in front of your kids. They can't understand why dad's calling mum stupid, why mum's calling dad dumb, and so forth. They find it really traumatic. Really traumatic. And never, ever, I mean, you shouldn't be doing it anyway, but never strike your other half. ما ضرب بكفي صلى الله عليه وسلم امرأة ولا خادما ولا ولدا in the Shama'il. The Prophet ﷺ never struck a woman, someone who served him, or a child. Kabini, never. He was the most gentlest of souls. And these things, they rock a child. So it's really, really important to understand that. Then other things, obviously, family circumstances, illness, school, bullying, their own coping skills, self-esteem, their IQ to a degree, their physical health, genetics is in there. Only 5% of mental health is because of genetics. It's a small part. Drugs and alcohol, that's another one. But they're the major triggers of mental health illnesses. Now, the younger you are when this happens, that becomes your 90%. Does that make sense? The younger you are when you experience these things, your brain gets molded at a younger age, especially if no one's helping you with what's going on. And this is why, follow this bit, this is what happens. Imagine a situation, something like, a child or you witnessing something that's not nice and it really rocks you. That's the situation, right? Actually, let me make it a bit lighter for you, because this conversation, I don't want it to be too heavy. I'm driving here on the way from Manchester to Blackburn, right? The situation is, I'm on the motorway and some muppet comes and drives and tries to cuts me up, right? That's the situation. What's the first thing I'm going to think? It's all right, just don't be vulgar. What am I going to think? Yeah, you'd be like, oh my God, what the are you doing, right? That's my thought. What's my emotion? Anger. I'd be like, rage, right? What am I going to do? Hand signals will go up, beep, beep. I might chase the guy, go, what? Bring it, right? That's what happens. You have a situation, the situation triggers a thought, the thought triggers an emotion, and it's emotion that triggers behavior. Okay? So what commonly happens is, like, I once had a woman, white Caucasian family, husband and wife. This guy was like 6'3", and this woman was a small 4 foot something. She's dragging him in. I'm thinking, this is a really wrong couple here already, right? She's dragging him in, and she says, "Doctor, you need to sort this guy out." I'm like, what's up with this guy? He said, he just wants to kill someone. He came in, he said he just wants to kill somebody. So he sat down and he's crying like a baby, and he's 6'4" or something. I said, what's up with you, bro? He said, you lot. You know what I mean by that, don't you? You lot. So I said, me? He went, no, not you, but you lot. You Muslimic lot. He was taking his anger out on the Muslimic lot because unfortunately his friend committed suicide because of he was homeless. But he had no one to blame, right? He had no one to blame. So that was his situation. His thought was, oh my God, my friend should have got help from so-and-so. Okay, who can I blame? Muslims, immigrants, all that sort of thing. And his emotion went to anger, and the only thing he could do was take it out on somebody. He wanted to kill somebody, genuinely wanted to kill somebody. So anyway, I spent about half an hour with him, and at the end of the consultation, he really liked me, and he said, I'm getting married, and I want you to come to my wedding, and if you don't come, I'm going to kill you. So, alhamdulillah, it was Ramadan. At the time of his wedding, it was Ramadan. I said, look, I'd love to come, bro, but I'll be fasting, and when I fast, I'm too tired, I can't dance, and you're just going to ruin your wedding. He said, all right, fine. Then when I left, he came to see me, booked an appointment to see me. He said, you're leaving? I said, yeah, I've got a job somewhere else closer to home and this and that. He said, right, here's my number. He said, if you don't keep in touch, I'm going to kill you. But the point is, you have situation, thought, emotion, and behavior, okay? And then if it's not kept in check, okay? If it's not kept in check, it starts off as an emotion. If it's not kept in check, what does it end up as? A mood. If it's not kept in check, what does it end up as? Temperament. That's who you are, okay? So, okay, who was playing today? Saudi and Poland, right? So some Saudis would be like, we beat Argentina, but we didn't beat Poland. How did that happen, right? So some of them will be a bit, right? But if you don't keep it in check, they might be moody for the next day or two. If you don't keep it in check, they might be moody for a month. And if they get completely kicked out of the World Cup, they'll remain moody. And then some people, they're just so into their football, that becomes their temperament. They're just moody all the time. Do you see what I'm trying to say? If it's not kept in check, okay, then it then embeds within you and can become your 90%. And then it does lead to depression. If you have a traumatic event, if you experience something that's not nice, if you're going through some difficulty and your emotions aren't kept in check, what happens is you go into this phase of depression where you have low mood, and it's defined as having low mood that lasts for about at least 2 to 4 weeks. That's number one, long time, okay? Because 2 to 4 weeks of a low mood is a long time. But this is the key, it affects your everyday life. So you can't get out of bed because you just can't do it. Don't have the energy, don't have the motivation. You're not brushing your teeth, you're not looking after your beard, you're not getting dressed properly, you're not opening your post, you're not paying your bills, you're messing up at work, you're not interested in going out with your friends like you usually do, and so forth. You just can't function. That's the key. You have low mood and you can't function, and it impacts your ability to function. Okay? And it's very different to just being low in mood because your football team lost. You also have quite a lot of other symptoms as well. Right at the top is genuinely you feel very, very sad. A lot, often, all the time, most of the time. Some people, they also have, poor memory, poor concentration, lack of sleep, lack of appetite. Men especially get anger. When a man is angry, it's usually because they're upset. Remember that, okay? Sleep problems, they're not interested in doing what they normally want to do. Some people, they comfort eat, some people, they don't eat. So lots of different symptoms. And then you have what's on the severe spectrum, this is real. Some people, they just don't want to be alive, or they have thoughts of harming themselves. That's very, very common. About 10% of Muslims experience this, more so in women. And then they have thoughts of actually acting. I want to do something to harm myself because I just don't feel like life's worth living. It's really, Allah save us. It's really, really sad. And then the other severe spectrum is when you have complete loss of function. So I went to somebody's house because they weren't leaving their house, and they just stay in their bedroom. Haven't got changed for a long time, haven't brushed his teeth for a long time, doesn't do anything, just sits there in his room. Just plays on his PlayStation, just doesn't want to come out. This is really, really, complete loss of function. And then one of the worst, in terms of severe spectrum, one of the worst symptoms is having psychotic symptoms where you hear voices or you see things, you hallucinate alongside with depressive symptoms. So that's depression. We'll talk about what to do in a sec. So that's depression. Then the next common one is anxiety. So we all experience anxiety. Just go back to when when you had exams at school, your first GCSEs or A levels, or your first interview at a job, or you're looking for a spouse, and it's the first time you meet somebody as a prospective wife or husband, for the sisters that are listening at home. Anything that can trigger anxiety, we all experience this. But it falls into clinical anxiety when it's most of the time you feel anxious, if not all of the time, and again it impacts your ability to function. I have patients who, because of their anxiety, they refuse to go certain places. They just can't do it. Think planes, trains, public places, events. They just can't, because it makes them so anxious. There's people who are that anxious to turn up late to an interview, they'd rather not go to the interview because they're worried about what someone will say, because of the anxiety that it triggers. They find it really hard to be in an environment like this. What are people looking at me? What are people going to think of me? Am I dressed okay? Am I this? Am I that? Constant. It's really, really debilitating. So the key is that it stops you from functioning normally. And so one of the key symptoms is overthinking. Patients report that they just can't stop thinking. Their mind's just like on overdrive, constantly worrying about the smallest of things. Then they have avoidance behavior. They can have memory issues. They can have loss of appetite, loss of sleep, trouble concentrating, aches and pains. They can feel sick. Then you have physical symptoms where you can have palpitations, where your heart beats fast. You can have the shakes. You can have fast breathing. Really, really, really debilitating. And what can happen commonly is that they can overlap. You can have depressive symptoms and become anxious as a result of it. You can have anxiety and have anxiousness and become depressed as a result of it. And they overlap. It's called depression and anxiety. Follow me? Yeah. So they overlap. So they can overlap. Okay. So this is the easy bit. I'm going to focus on depression and anxiety because that's the two most commonest ones that we see in our community. The easy bit is recognizing it. What's the hard bit? Doing something about it. Okay? That's the hard bit. Okay? Step number 1. Seek help. Okay? There is so much out there to help you now. There's so much more out there compared to only 5 years ago and what's out there now. You have to seek help. And if you know somebody who is struggling with a mental health problem, encourage him, encourage her to seek help. Okay? And how do you do it? Do it with pyar and muhabbat, nothing else. Okay? Most people, they respond to you when you're talking heart to heart. Heart to heart. That's how you get people to respond. So let me talk you through how to seek help effectively, okay? In order to seek help, what you have to do if you're suffering from a mental health problem is that you have to acknowledge what you're feeling. That's the biggest hurdle. Accepting that actually I might be unwell here. Maybe my friends and family are right. Maybe if I look within and just reflect, actually I'm suffering here. My mental health, my psychological state is not in a good place. Really important, especially for men. Why do men find it hard to accept that there's a problem? Yeah, they feel less of a man. The man's brain, the way Allah's wired our brain, is that alpha male. Nothing can go wrong. And if it does, I can fix it. But the thing with mental health, what happens is like, well, where do I begin to fix this? And then men freak out. Then what happens is it's easier to then switch off. I'm not going to go there. It's just too much of an effort. But actually, the real man, remember, our definitions are from Allah and His Rasul ﷺ and no one and nothing else. Definitions. How did the Prophet ﷺ define a man? Anybody know? How did the Prophet ﷺ define a man? When he said, who's the strongest of you?
Is it someone who has a strong faith?
Probably.
Control his anger.
Control his anger. So he asked the Sahaba, who's the strongest, who's a man amongst you? And they said, the one who can grapple someone and floor them. And the Rasul ﷺ said, no. He goes, it's the one who can control his anger. What he was getting at is the one who can control his emotions. Because one of the primary emotions that's difficult to control for a human being, not just men, for a human being, is anger. That's why if you look at the books of Tazkiyah, one of the only emotions actually that they talk about in terms of spiritual disease is anger. So men, it's really important to acknowledge what you're feeling. Really, really important. Then you've got to tell yourself it's going to be okay. Why? Because Allah doesn't give you something that you can't endure. Remember that. Allah does not give you something that you cannot endure. Okay? And like we've talked about, is it possible to get better? Of course it is. 100%. I've got patients who have been through the mill and back. And mashallah, some of them are off medication now. They don't even need to see a therapist. They've had a breakthrough. That chapter, like I said, that season, that chapter of their life is closed. Okay? You have to be gentle with yourself as well. When you love somebody, do you make sure that they get a good night's sleep, yes or no? Yep. When you love somebody, do you make sure that they eat well, yes or yes? Yeah? You make sure they have a good time? You make sure you put a smile on their face? Okay, you matter as well. But to be able to do that, you have to be gentle with yourself and you have to have compassion with yourself. You have to start loving yourself. Not in a narcissistic way where you all leave this masjid and start putting your pictures on Facebook saying, hey, look at me, because I love myself. No. What I mean is value yourself. Yeah? Value yourself. One of the beautiful statements of our ulama, that one of the biggest blessings is that Allah gave you life. Just think about it. Just think about it. Allah loved you enough to give you life. You are worth something. Okay? And that's where it starts. And then recognizing you have Allah. So let's talk about how to make it work. So a couple of tips, okay? Just ignore that link because this is like the master copy of my slides that I do across the country, and then I'll just explain what the link is in a second. But what you can do, if you do suffer with a problem, as long as you're not on the severe spectrum. So if you're on the severe spectrum, so for example, suicidal thoughts, psychotic symptoms, lack of total function, you need to go to your doctor and you need to seek help because you probably do need medication. Okay, but if you're not on a severe spectrum and you're still worried about going to the GP, right? You're still worried about it because of social pressures, or you're worried about what people say and so forth. You don't need to go to your GP. You can self-refer now anywhere in the country. You can self-refer to psychologists. All you do is you just Google Blackburn, or whoever's listening, wherever you live in England. Just Google your area, so Blackburn, and then type up on Google in capitals IAPT. Okay, improving access to psychological therapies. It will take you to the local mental health services, and there'll be an online self-referral form. And you go on there and you just self-refer. That's it. A therapist will contact you within 4 to 6 weeks, ask you loads of questions about what's going on and try and assess you, and then book you into a therapy session, which I'll come to why that's important in a second. But you don't need your GP, but you do if you're on the severe spectrum. The other thing is look, we're all online now. Look, generally I don't like to never Google two things. Never Google health, okay? Never Google anything to do with your health. Because if you do, you type something up, headache, what will Google say? Cancer, or you're dead, right? You're supposed to be dead 2 years ago, right? Never Google health, okay? And the second thing is never Google your religion. Never Google your religion. Never, okay? There are sacred texts on the internet which have been tampered with. Just be careful, okay? Be careful when you don't Google your religion. You can find a fatwa for anything, can't you now? On Google. If you want a fatwa, you'll find it from somewhere.
It gives the correct fatwa, doesn't it?
Huh?
It gives you the answer you're looking for.
It gives you the answer you're looking for. But the religion, Islam is to submit, not to your nafs. It's submit to Allah, isn't it? And that's why it's very dangerous. But I'll let you Google this, okay? So it's a couple of resources. Don't worry, the slides will be on the YouTube stream. So if I go too fast, but look at that. There's loads of online stuff which you can access. And it's like doing therapy online. They call it ECBT, electronic cognitive behavioral therapy, which I'll come to what that is in a second. But you can do all of this online. Loads and loads of good resources. And for young people, there's two there. Kuth is like a messaging system, where if someone's in a crisis situation, therapists are there literally, and they can message back and support them. Something to consider. Drugs and alcohol. Look, unfortunately, it's true. A lot of people use that as a coping mechanism, just to escape. Okay, just to escape. Muslims do as well. We can't pretend that it doesn't happen. It does happen. Muslims drink. Muslims smoke weed. Muslims do drugs because they just want to break away. And when I say we, our community, we need to create an open space to generate a conversation. Some people are really drowning. They don't want to be in that state of being addicted to drugs and alcohol. So if you are using that, or if you know somebody who uses drugs and alcohol as a cope mechanism, again, I'll let you Google this. Just Google drugs and alcohol services Blackburn. It will come up. Because every community has it. That's all you have to do. And you don't need a GP. You can self-refer. And they'll put you on a program on how to reduce it. In the short run, drugs will make you feel good and alcohol will make you feel good and escapism. But in the long run, it acts as a depressant. It will make you feel depressed in the long run, and it will put a hole in your wallet because they're quite expensive stuff. And of course, our massages have brought. There's some massages, mashallah, they have a drug reducing program to help people, because they don't want to be on drugs, so they have a program, something to consider. Okay, so that's the way you do it. Okay, but also let's have some ultra adult conversations. Okay. This is the last few bits of my slides. Ultra adult conversations. Yeah? I'm going to talk you through how to rewire your brain. Remember, by the time you're 35, 90% of your brain is already made up. But the good news is that the way Allah's designed the brain is that you can rewire your brain at any point. You can think differently at any point. You can be different at any point. You can. Okay? If that wasn't the case, there would be no point of tazkiyah. If it was, we were fixed. What we are is what we are, and that's it. Allah's made me that way. You heard that? I can't change. Allah's made me that way. There would be no point of Quran, Anbiya, Da'wah, tazkiyah, nothing. Okay? It's always possible to change. Okay? But this is where it gets ultra adult conversations. No one can help you but you. Remember that. Okay? No one can really help you but you. You have to help yourself. Okay? And so if you want to bring change in your life, you have to start with yourself. You can't expect your life to improve by virtue of other people. Understand that. Okay? Really, really important. So how do you do that? Number one, I'll say it again. Learn to have compassion with yourself. Just like what you do for other people that you love, you've got to do that for yourself. Okay? And then tell yourself, I'm going to reset. You have the capacity at any point in your life to say, stop. In fact, that's what happens. I've got patients who are like, that's it, I'm done. I'm done with the way I feel. That's it, chapter's closed, I'm moving on. I'm done with the way I look. I'm done with how big I am. I'm fed up of being overweight. I'm fed up of my job. I'm fed up of my financial, they're like, that's it, I'm done. They literally hit a button and say, I'm done. That's the starting point. No more. Okay, so you hit the reset button, right? No more. Then what do you do? You get rid of things that are toxic in your life. This is number one. You get rid of what? Things that are toxic in your life. And this is where it's ultra adult conversations, okay? Understand this. There are people in your life who are toxic. Yes or no? 100%. 100%, yeah? There are, right? Maulana, if I say something wrong, you have to correct me, okay? Because I'm not alim ad-din. And you are, okay? There are rules with our tradition on how you who you can cut off from and how you cut them off, right? People that are toxic in your life, if they're not family, if they're not blood, okay, figure out how to just distance yourself from them in a beautiful way. وَهْجُرْهُمْ هَجْرًا جَمِيلًا. Just in a beautiful way, just distance yourself from them in the best of ways that you can. Some people who are your associates, friends and colleagues, they might not be good for your psychological state. They might not be good for you in terms of your growth in life. They might not be good for you for your religion. They could be toxic for you. So figure out who they are and how you're going to create that healthy distance. Family. It's true, some family members are toxic, okay? But you have to learn and do this with an alim. Don't do this on your own because there's rules when it comes to family. Okay? Allah's regarded family as sacred. With family, if there are people who are toxic for you, go to an alim and say, how do I draw healthy boundaries? I'm not going to cut them out. I can't cut them out because Allah comes first. How do I draw healthy boundaries in the best of ways so that they're as least toxic for me? And do that. Okay? Do that. It's really, really important. And it's not a sign of being cruel. Okay? It's a sign of self-care. But you have to figure out how to do it. Okay? And the best of people to help you with this are the ulama, because there's rules with this. Okay? That's number one. Number two, food. We talked about this last week. If you missed it, it should be on the YouTube feed. Don't separate your physical and mental health, ever. They're both linked. There was a study done called the SMILE study. They got a group of people who suffered from depression, mild to moderate. They put them in two groups. One group went on this diet, Mediterranean diet. The other group went on antidepressants. And guess what? Those that weren't on medication but were just on change of diet to a Mediterranean diet, they had more recovery rates and less relapses. In other words, when they got better, there was less people going back into depression compared to people who are on medication. You are what you eat. There's plenty of evidence now that if you have a low carb, no processed diet, it does wonders for your brain. So whether you suffer from a mental health problem or not, and double so if you do suffer from a mental health problem, you have to have a super rich, nutritious diet. That's the second rule that I give to my patients. You are what you eat. And those of you that missed it last time, right, look, 60% of our foods are processed. They're chemicalized rubbish. It's gonna affect your physical state, it's gonna affect your brain. Okay, so limit as much as you can processed foods, carbohydrates, and added sugars, okay? Look, 50% of us, we talked about last week, for those of you that weren't here, 50% of us are overweight. If you want to lose weight, very simple. Just cut out your carbohydrates, cut out your sugars, because there's more evidence of losing weight through diet changes than exercise. Run all you won't lose weight. I'll skip this bit because we talked about it last week, but if you're interested in books, these are the ones that you want to get hold of. And you've got a library, haven't you? Yeah, get them in there. Get all of them in there. Okay, third thing, you have to exercise. Khalas. I mentioned it last week. I've got a patient who, Allah save us. He was 45 years old, married, 2 kids, wife had an affair. Allah save us. And ugly divorce, Caucasian man, non-Muslim. And he went from living in a really plush house to ugly divorce, lost a lot of money, lived in a small flat looking at 4 walls all day. He wanted to commit suicide. He wanted to kill himself because my life's over. Desperate not to go on medication. So I said, okay, fine, why don't you start running? He was like, you what? I want to kill myself and you tell me to run. That's like Daily Mail stuff, isn't it? A Muslim doctor tells suicidal patient to go running. So he went from 0, so we had to talk about the science behind it. He went from 0 to, he runs 12K 3 times a week. And when he comes for his follow-ups, he says, Dr. Goga, he says, if I didn't meet you, I'd be dead. Hey, it's from Allah. Agreed? I'm just carrying out his mashiyat, right? I'm just the messenger. It's Allah who saved him. But he said, if I didn't meet you, he said, I'd be dead. So what exercise does naturally, it releases endorphins in your brain. Endorphins are your happy hormones. It's a natural way of releasing it. Not only do you physically feel good, but psychologically you feel good. You feel alive when you exercise. So it's really, really important. And just the other health benefits we talked about last week. If you look at depression, it reduces your risk of developing depression by 30%, just if you do exercise. So imagine if you suffer from a mental health problem, how much wonders it would do for you if for your mental health if you just started to exercise. And these are some of the other health benefits, which I won't go into because we talked about it last week. But what do you need to do? Oh, that one there. Okay, look at some of the benefits there. Okay, really, really important. But you can catch up with last week because time's short. But what do you need to do? All you need to do is 150 minutes a week, which equates to 22 minutes a day. That's it. Which can mean 11 minutes in the morning, 11 minutes in the evening. Which can mean walk to the masjid instead of taking your car. Okay? Which can mean just get up 10 minutes earlier and go to sleep 10 minutes later and do some exercise. Do something. Okay? But it's really important to incorporate it. And if you're interested in terms of the science behind it, look at Spark. Really good book about the science behind the benefits of exercise, not just from a mental health point of view, from a physical health point of view as well. MashaAllah, I have a patient, she went into heart failure. And the cardiologist said, yeah, that's it. She was 48? Very young to go into heart failure at the age of 48. And the cardiologist said, yep, lifelong medication, you're not going to get better, you're going to die 10 years younger and this and that. She came to see me, she was like mortified. I said, don't listen to him. I said, what? We talked about the benefits of exercise. MashaAllah, within a year, it's from Allah. I scanned her without her cardiologist knowing. And her heart failure reversed. MashaAllah. So there's tons of benefits behind it. Take a look at it. Next thing, get off social media. I said it last week. Look, I don't say it to show off. I say it to give you hope. You can live without a smartphone. I have one. I don't have one. This is my kids call it the dumb phone. Right? Get off it. It's so toxic. Remember, your eyes and your ears, babani maftuhani ila al-qalb. They're two open doors to the heart. It influences you whether you like it or not. Okay? Get off it. It kills your time. It just eats you up. You are what you read, you are what you watch. Okay? And make sure you verify it before you pass things on as well. But some people, they're just glued. Glued. Like, next time Maulana does his Jummah khutbah, guarantee you there'll be about a dozen people on their phone. Just scrolling through stuff. It's tragic. You know when you come to a masjid, right? By the way, Maulana, this masjid is beautiful. MashaAllah. It's absolutely beautiful. It's the second time I've been here. First time I noticed it. Today I noticed it. There is some serious sakina in this masjid. MashaAllah, tabarakallah. You know when you go to, do you remember when you were kids and you used to go to, when you were part of your RE lessons, you used to go to a church and there's a synagogue and then a temple and this and that. What do you notice about all these places? People go there for what? For prayer, for reflection, for solace, for peace, for quiet. When you go to a synagogue or a church or a Hindu temple or wherever, people aren't on their phones. Muslims, when they go to the masjid, they're on their phones. Alhamdulillah, I was in Umrah. It's standard now. People are like on their phones while they're doing tawaf, checking out what's online. They're in the Rawdah of the Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, and the guy's on his phone. It's really sad. It's really sad. Like, get off it. Completely get off it as much as you can. Because the thing about social media is that when you're looking at people who are, you know, on the apparent doing really, really well, it can make you feel bad about yourself. You're always going to compare yourself. You're always going to think you're not good enough, or you're not beautiful enough, or you're this or you're that. It's just the reason why it's important is because look at this, right? First lockdown, what they did, they got a group of young people and they told them to just get off Facebook. Let's see what happens to your brain. Within 1 month, they felt less depressed and less anxious, and they felt more happier. Within 1 month of coming off Facebook. Okay, so imagine if you just let go of everything. And look, the reality is that we're addicted, and we know it. 40% of our time outside of work is spent on a TV or a screen. 40%. Adults, outside of work, spend another 8 hours on a screen. Accumulative per day. Children, 6.5 hours outside of school. People log on every 2 hours. People check their smartphones every 12 minutes for no reason. People swipe 2,000 times a day for no reason whatsoever. Do you want to know what the litmus test is for whether you're addicted to your phone? If you want to know whether you're addicted, you know what the litmus test is? When you wake up in the morning, if the first thing you do is grab your phone and you do this, and you're horizontal, you haven't even got up, you're like this, right? And you haven't said, Alhamdulillah, li ahyana ba'da ma amatana wa ilayhi nushur. You don't mention the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you don't mention Allah's name, and the first thing you do is go for your phone, you're addicted to your phone. If that's the last thing you do, and don't say to me, I listen to Quran before I go to sleep, I listen to somebody's bayan before I go to sleep. If the last thing you do before you go to sleep is check your phone or go on your phone, you're addicted to it, you're kidding yourself. Just memorize what you need to read before you go to sleep. What's wrong with you? Allah's given you such a powerful brain. Don't kid yourself. That's the litmus test. We did this last week, let's do it again. Assume that you're 60 years old. Okay? Assume that you're 60 years old. Okay? If you work 8 hours a day, how much of your life has gone? 20 years has gone. Okay? If you work 8 hours a day, if you sleep 8 hours a day, how much of your life has gone? Another 20 years. How many years you got left? 20. If you assume that for the first 15 years of your life, because you're a kid, you don't do anything good, how many years have you got left? 5. We spend on average, by the time we hit 60, 5 years of our life on our phone. By the time you're 60, you have nothing to give to Allah. Nothing. So just think about that, how important it is to actually control this, okay? As a result, our attention span is only 8 seconds. If you want to know how good your attention span is, next time you come and pray namaz, just see how long it lasts. your concentration. If it's 8 seconds, there's a problem. And isn't this true for us? Me included. Isn't it true? We can't last 8 seconds with our attention span because this thing has just glued us. So really, really important. Anybody who's interested, how to unplug, get this book. It's bags of fun. And get your kids off it as well. If your kids aren't in secondary school, don't give them a smartphone. When they're in secondary school, give it to them for a couple of reasons. One, school pickups if I need to. And you know, they have like the year group. Mums and dads have this year group, and they can catch up, and their friends have a year group so they can, you know, about exams or if they missed anything. They shouldn't have certain apps on their phone, and they should not be going on their phone when on their own. There's too much pornographic material out there. Too much. Okay? And 1 in 2 Muslims visit pornographic sites. Allah save us. And children, like, they have access to it. It can be really, really, you know, awful for them. So just be really careful how, you know, what you do with your kids. Okay, we'll keep going about how to help yourself. Next thing is sleep. Sleep is ridiculously important for any, especially if you have a mental health problem, okay? Now, what you want to go for is at least 7 to 8 hours a night. Now, at this time of year, you can get 10 if you wanted to. Sleep, favorite pastime, love it. But try and get at least 7 to 8 hours. And if you're having broken sleep, it doesn't matter, just catch up during the day. But it's massive for the brain. How do you help yourself? Again, no screen time, 1 hour before you go to bed and 1 hour afterwards. Watch what will happen to your brain. You'll be much more alive, much more sharp, your concentration span will increase, your memory will improve as well. If you struggle to go to sleep, have a warm bath before you go to sleep. Lavender oil, chamomile tea. Chamomile tea is disgusting, but it helps you sleep. Just try it. And consider doing muraqabah. Okay? Consider doing meditation. It's part of our tradition. Okay? That will help you sleep. Okay, now back to the mind, okay? Remember we talked about how there's certain things that are really traumatic? You've witnessed something in your life that's really traumatic, or there's a festering sore in your life that's really, really bothering you. Something that's really, really getting you, really to the core getting you. So I ask my patients when they have depression and anxiety, I say, look, has anything not nice happened to you in your life? If they say, no, everything's been fine. That's okay, fine. Then I say, well, okay, if you can change your life in 1 or 2 ways, what would it be? And usually then something comes out. It's usually 3 things: social stress, financial stress, relationship stress. That's it. Okay? What I tell them is, look, whatever's happened to you in the past or whatever's happening to you now, deal with your demons. Okay? You have to deal with your demons. If you don't deal with your demons, they're going to deal with you. Khalas. There's no other way. So if something has really, really bothered you in the past and you haven't had a chance to talk about it or manage it in your mind, you've got to deal with it. If something's happening now, if it's your boss, if it's your colleagues, if it's your other half, if it's your parents, you have to deal with it. You have to fight it head on, or else nothing's going to change. You have to deal with your demons. And the reason why it's important is because, look, you can only control how you react to things that you can't control. Can we control the weather? No. Can we control the political system? Can we control technocrats? Can we control anything? Anybody? No. What's the only thing you can control? You and your brain. Allah's giving you that power. And that's where this conversation is going, okay? It's all about how to change your mind by changing your perception. And this is where it gets really, really interesting. Do you remember that scenario I gave you when I'm driving to work, when I'm driving here, and somebody cuts me up and I get angry, and a few fingers go up and I'm swearing? Okay? This is where CBT comes in on how to change how you perceive things and how you view things. So remember we talked about situation, thought, feeling, behavior. What if, as I was driving and he nearly cut me up, and that crazy driver then could suddenly just tell me telepathically, he'd say, Zakariya, I'm really, really sorry I nearly cut you up, but actually my mum is on a deathbed, I've got to get to the hospital, I'm going to miss it. That's what that person's told me. What's the first thing I'm going to think? You'd be like, you know what, bro? It's all right. Just drive a bit more safely next time. What's my emotions going to go from anger to what? Sorrow and sympathy. I hope you make it. And I feel really sorry that your mum's on her last leg. What's my behavior going to be? I'm going to be going from beep, beep, swearing to what? I'll calm down a little bit. I'll maybe put the brakes on and just chill out. That happened in an instant. Okay? If I can do that with a silly situation of a car, do you think you could do that with major situations? Yes or no? The answer is yes. You can change the way you view it, your thoughts behind it, your emotions in an instant. The longer you've left it, the longer it will take. But it's really important to deal with it because, you know, you've all got gardens, right? When you're doing gardening in the spring, when spring comes and you tidy up your garden, there's loads of weeds. What's the wrong thing to do to deal with the weeds? What's the wrong thing to do? Leave them or what? Snip them, trim them. What's the right thing to do when you've got weeds in your garden? Get it from the root. It's the same with your own problems. It will take longer if you go to the root causes of your problems, but I'm telling you, the effects, the positive effects will last longer. Your thought processes would change, your feeling would change, and your behavior would change. I'll skip this bit because I'm running out of time. Okay, and then the next thing I want you to do, so we've talked about all these steps that you need to take to help yourself. The next thing I want you to do is shifting your focus, because let's be honest, we focus on things that don't really matter more than on things that really matter. And there's only a few things in your life that matter, because most of the stuff that we focus on is complete nonsense. It just is. All you need to do is focus on these things in your life, okay? In no particular order. Focus on your own personal growth, in your career, in your learning, whatever you're doing. Focus on that. Focus on, in terms of your wealth, having enough. Not being a millionaire, just having enough so that you're content. Once you get that, stop. Don't go any further. There's no need to. You'll just waste your time. Focus on your health and how you're going to figure out making yourself feeling better, stronger, more healthier. Focus on relationships with your lifelong partner, with your lifelong spouse, how to make that work, how to make that solid. Focus on your relationship with your parents, with your brothers, with your sisters, with your close friends and family members. How am I going to make that work? Focus on yourself, in terms of how you view yourself. Focus on your religion. I mean, that should be right at the top. This was developed by a non-Muslim. Focus on your spiritual connection with whatever you're spiritually connected to. So focus on your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and make that your biggest focus, more than following somebody else on Twitter. Okay? Focus on how you're going to make a difference to a human being in your community. The happiest people on this planet are people who do things for other people without any monetary gain. They don't want any money for it. They're the it's a gift that Allah gives you. I was with a mufti from London, very famous. I don't think he'd appreciate mentioning his name. I was speaking to him about this. And he said, I regard my success a result of people's du'as. I regard my success, this is his words, as a result of people's du'a. So he goes out of his way to help people. And they're in like massive crisis, mental health point of view. When someone's in a crisis and someone's in dire need, when they make du'a for you, how do they make du'a? From the depths of their heart. And he said, my success is because of that. And it's one of the gifts that Allah gives you. And these are the only things you need to focus on. Nothing else really matters. And if you want a bit more information, take a look at these 3 books. Get these for your library. If you want any, this, I'm just scratching the surface with some of this self-help. And then the last thing I'm going to talk about is this. There is room to strengthen your faith. Like we said, it's not a sign of weak iman, but is there room to strengthen faith? Of course there is. And that's until you die. Okay? There's always room to strengthen your faith. So just a couple of things. In Surah Baqarah, Allah says, perhaps, you don't like something, but it's good for you. And maybe you like something, but it's not good for you. Wallahu ya'lam wa antum la ta'lam. Allah knows and you don't know. Modern day psychologists, I had one of them say, human beings, listen to this, he said, human beings are notorious for not knowing what's good for them. I'll say it again. Human beings, not my words, human beings are notorious for not knowing what's good for them. Imam Shafi'i, he met Shaitan once. And Shaitan was trying to, mess with his mind, saying, what's this, Allah's, decided everything for you, and Imam Shafi'i said, listen, he said, if I was to rewrite my life, I would write it exactly the way Allah's already given me my life. I would write my life exactly how Allah's planned my life. Because I know He knows what's good for me, and I don't know what's good for me. I know someone who went through such a difficult time, You can't even imagine what he went through. He's a really good friend of mine, and he said, and we were talking about it, and he said, what happened to me? He said, it was the best thing that happened to me. I said, why? He goes, I found Allah. Because it didn't matter anymore. He said, where I was and where I am now, he said, because of that, what I went through, he said, I found Allah. And sometimes that's what Allah does to you. He shakes you a little bit. You know when someone's just not paying attention, you know, you've got a kid and they don't want to revise for their exams, and you shake them and you go, what's wrong with you? Come on, this is really important. That's what Allah does to you when you have a bit of turbulence in your life. Okay, so just know that Allah knows what's good for you. Okay, really, really important to understand that. Second thing, Surah Ma'arij, Inna al-insana khuliqa halu'a. Allah's created insan a little bit anxious, a little bit uncertain. إِذَا مَسَّهُ الشَّرُّ جَزُوعًا. When bad things happen to them, they freak out. وَإِذَا مَسَّهُ الْخَيْرُ مَنُوعًا. And when good things happen to them, they become really stingy. They don't want to share or celebrate the love. Except who? إِلَّا الْمُصَلِّينَ. Salah is one of the gifts that Allah gives you in return, is He makes you grounded in your psychological state. You know people, when you're going through a difficult time, you know that they're like the mountain, they don't budge with the wind. The wind can blow as hard as it wants. Okay, the times of turbulence can just, but they will just stay like a mountain. And you look at their lives, they are people who have established salah. So if you haven't established salah, it's never too late. There's a brother in our local masjid. Earlier this year, we had a massive celebration, massive, because he said, I just finished 30 years of qada. 30 years of qada, I caught up. And he had a massive feast. So for years, I was thinking, what he used to do, he used to be the first one in the masjid, open the masjid, and he'd kick everybody out. He'd kick everybody out. And I'd be like, why, what are you doing? He goes, I'm carpet burning. So I thought, he's cleaning the carpet? What's he doing? I didn't think what he meant. But then I realized when he told us that, he's done 30 years of qada, he's caught up. He was carpet burning, going up and down doing sajda. So it's never too late. And if you aren't, just start off with your farad. Just, okay, fine, drop your sunnah, drop your nawafil. Start off with your farad, and then when you're established with your farad, then kick in with the sunnah. But you've got to start. It's one of the gifts that Allah gives you. Illal musallin, those who pray. Next thing, you have to engage with the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You have to read it. And I don't mean, yes, recite it. That's part of our tradition. Reciting the Quran is really, really important. It's just standard. You have to be reading Quran every single day. Don't let a day go by where you haven't looked at the mushaf. And if you can, 1 juz a day, so you do 1 Quran a month. But also read the Quran. Alaysa Allahu bikafin abda? Is Allah not enough for you? I mean, that just one jumla is like, that one jumla is like, it's just incredible. The other day, my teacher and one of our teachers, and we were talking about Qadi Iyad, who's wrote a really good book called The Shifa, in love with the Prophet ﷺ. And one of his famous poems was Mimma zadani sharafan wa izza. That what Qadi Iyad says, that one of my greatest honors, and grace that Allah has given me, something that I'm really proud of. Wakittu bi akhmusi atayu thurayya. I'm so proud of it that it's as if my feet are going to go flying to the stars. That's how happy I am at this. At what? Dukhuli tahta qawlika ya ibadi. That the fact that Allah, you've entered me under the statement, oh my slaves. Allah's addressing, and you're addressing me as, oh my ibadi, my slaves. And وَأَنْ سَيَّرْتَ أَحْمَدَ لِي نَبِيًّا. And you've made Ahmad, Muhammad my prophet. Like for him, nothing else matters. And that's the sort of thing that's the sort of flex you want to be on. Recognizing that actually, one of the greatest things that creates happiness is that I have Allah. And I'm from the ummah of the Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, the greatest man that's ever walked on this planet. These are the sort of things you want to focus on. So Quran is really, really important as well. And then the other thing is engage with Allah. There are certain du'as that are designed to help you with your mental state. These are prophetic prescriptions. And you've got to take them. This is something that ulama recommend reading every morning and every evening. Who knows the story behind this? Anybody know the story behind this dua? Abu Umama radiyallahu anhu warda. He was sat in the masjid of the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, like this, and he was sat at a time when it wasn't time for namaz. So the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam walked in and said, "Ya Abu Umama, ma ajlasaka fi masjidi fi ghayri waqti as-salah." Why are you sat in the masjid when it's not even time for namaz? And he said, "I'm feeling really sad." He said, "I'm feeling really sad, and I'm in debt. I don't know how to get out of it." So the Prophet ﷺ said, "Okay, I'll teach you some words. أذهب الله همك وقضى دينك." If you read this, Allah will remove your sadness and will sort out your debts. So he said, "Tell me." And he taught him this dua. Read it morning and evening with conviction, with absolute certainty, yaqeen, that Allah will sort things out for you. You just watch what will happen to your brain. And then another famous one, the Prophet ﷺ would rarely miss this dua, morning and evening, about afiyah. One of the greatest things you can ask Allah for is well-being. But these are prophetic prescriptions that you have to do morning and evening. Who's in control? Allah. Understand? It's absolutely in His capability to make change. So these are things that you have to do. Another thing that the Prophet ﷺ suggested, that whoever, and in one narration it's whoever says it in the morning and evening. We learnt this from our Hazrat Rahimullah Mawlana Yusuf Mutala Rahmatullah alayh, who used to live on this road. And he taught us this, that every morning, first thing when you open your eyes, first thing you should do is Raditu billahi rabba. I'm pleased, Allah, I'm happy that you're my Lord. Wa bil Islami deen, and that my religion is Islam, wa bi Muhammad Nabiyya, and the Prophet ﷺ is my prophet. Look at what Allah gives you in return. It's upon Allah to please you. It's upon who? Allah to please you. These are prophetic prescriptions. You do these things, inshallah, you'll see a difference. The other thing is read. Get off your phones as much as you can and read about the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. If you look at his life and what he went through, you're talking trauma. If you just, on paper, look at his life, you're talking trauma. Never saw his father. That's hard. Mum passed away when he was 6. That's hard. Mum passed away while they were actually on travel. Who was with him? Ayman. That's it. He had to bury his mother at the age of 6. I mean, that's like too much, isn't it, when you think about it? And he had to walk all the way from Abwa back to Makkah. Imagine what was going through his bichara 6-year-old mind. 8 years old, lost his granddad. I remember my granddad passed away. I was very close to my granddad. And I was 18 and I was very upset. Person was 8. And then, was raised by his uncle. Life was ticking along nicely. Then prophethood came in, and then it was 23 years of hardship. Even right to the end. There were times where the Prophet ﷺ would come home from, his timetable. He'd be up all night in Qiyamul Layl. He'd rest for a little bit, go lead Fajr. After Fajr, he'd give time to the Sahaba. He'd interpret dreams. He'd see to people's needs. It would get to about 9, 10 o'clock our time. He'd pray duha. Then he'd go home. And so many times he'd say, Hal indakum shay? Do you have anything to eat at home? Do you have anything? When Hazrat Rahimullah, when he narrated this to us, he said, how many people here have had to do that? No one put their hand up. It's true, isn't it? We haven't had to do that. And then, so many times, and then the wives would say, Ma indana shay, we don't have anything. And the Prophet would say, neither l'sa'im, okay, I'm fasting. None of us had to do that. But if you look at his life, why am I saying this to you? If you look at his life, he was the most content human being in existence. The most content. He was never displeased. Yes, he was saddened, but he didn't stay there. Yes, he had periods where his psychological state might have been, because we'll never know, might have been a little bit, oh my God, I'm worried about something. But he was content. And he was content with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and he was a happy individual. You read any descriptions of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, da'iman bil bishr, always smiling. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Everyone who met him felt like that. They were his best friend, despite what he was going through. And that's why reading about his life is ridiculously important. And, Hazrat wrote a lot of books. That's just me being biased, man, okay, because with my husband. But look, we can't complain. The reality is, brothers and sisters, that 2/3 of the planet are living off £2-3 a day. By anybody's standards, we are rich. Us living here, we are, by anybody's standard. We're like in the top 30% in the world. So remember, your nightmare that you're going through could be somebody else's dream. And if you are in this state, just ask yourself this: why is my level of happiness not tied to the quality of my life? Ask yourself this question. Recently I went to Tim Hortons, which is a cafe. It's a Canadian brand, and I was sat there with my friend. I said, "Subhanallah," I said, "Brian," I said, "we, Indian origin, we're in England, and we're having Canadian coffee. That's insane. Like, you can have any food from any country, anywhere in the world, delivered to your house by just swiping right. Isn't that true? You can have clothes from anywhere in the world. You can have furniture from anywhere in the world. You can have anything from anywhere in the world without even getting off your butt and just delivered. Isn't that true? Okay, why are you not happy? Your quality of life is really, really good. Just ask yourself these questions. Just ask yourself, is it that you haven't actually done 2 minutes of gratitude a day? This is something that's recommended in our tradition. This is what psychologists say, but this is something that's recommended in our tradition. Just try it. If you just sit down for 2 minutes before you go to sleep and just count your blessings. Count your blessings. You'll be much happier in your life. You'll feel happy, your sleep will improve, your blood pressure drops, your energy levels increase. You'll live longer as well. You'll be much, much more happier. Count your blessings. Again, get this book away for the library. I read it recently. It's really, really good. Really good. Engage with dhikr. Again, Allah's prescription. Allah bi dhikrillah tatma'inul qulub. It's only through dhikr that hearts find content. It's only. So get part of a dhikr program, like you have to. And the greatest dhikr is Quran. A couple of, I love these statements. And you should play this in your head over and over again so it just sticks with you, okay? Imam Ghazali's teacher said to him that, heartbreak over past events. So if you're constantly just thinking about yesterday and you're worried about the future, you miss out on now. You completely miss out on now, and you only have now. So what's he trying to tell us? Be present. Love this statement of Imam Ghazali's teacher. He said, "Da'i tadbir ala man khalaqaka." Leave the planning for the one who made you. And then he said to Imam Ghazali, "Tastarih, go and relax. Go and relax." I haven't put it in here because it's not relevant to the depression, but one of the other statements that I love, one of his teachers said to Imam Ghazali, he said, "Ya bunay, oh my son, ish ma'a ahli zamanik, wa la taqtadi bihim." Live with the people of your time, but don't follow them in their ways. And he said, "Ma ashad al-haya ma'a al-ahya bi-iqtidad al-amwat." He said, how hard is life living with people who are alive, but you're following people who have passed away? In other words, following the way of the Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, the Sahaba, the awliya, the Salaf al-Salihin, it's hard. But that's the sort of mizaj you want to have. You'll be 10 times more happy if you just let go of people's ways and follow the way of people who've made it with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Ibn Qayyim al-Juziyya, rahimahullah, one of our greatest scholars, is from shaitan. A lot of sadness is from shaitan. A lot of it. Just to make you lose hope in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So think good of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And when you think good of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that's exactly what will happen. It's just the way Allah works. Think good of Allah. Now look, a lot of these spiritual things, again, we've just scratched the surface. You can't get that through books. If you connect yourself with a wali of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, a saint, a righteous person, it'll do wonders for your psychological state. Honestly, I'm talking from experience. It'll do wonders for your psychological state. Try it. And last thing, take the way of the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Read his biography. Read the way he was. Read his take on life. He was the greatest psychologist. Read, and you'll find all the answers. Inshallah, we'll stop there. I've gone over time. My apologies. Jazakallah khair for your patience. Any questions, Wes? And I don't mind taking from the floor as well, as long as it's not personal, not too personal anyway. 3 questions. Am I going to read them out? Oh. See, whereas all three questions require 3 bayans. Let me try, because it's important. Let's do the third one. How can you deal with mental health issues when the issue you struggle with is never understood by the Muslim community, and why doesn't Muslim communities find solutions for modern issues rather than hide it and let it grow, causing major struggle in silence? So that's what we were talking about. So there just needs to be open conversations in whatever setting it can be, whether it's massages. So there's one masjid Zakariya in Bolton. They actually have counselling sessions. So the imams there, they've been trained for, it's a discipline, it's called Islamic counselling. So they've been trained and they offer counselling sessions in their masjid. So that's one way of, and that's linked to the first question about educating and empowering our community and community leaders, is that there are courses out there. Like, have you heard of Al-Balagh, the institute, online institute? So they're starting an Islamic counselling course as of next week, I think. But I suppose in answer to those two questions, the first one and the second one is just increasing awareness. That's it. And as much awareness as we increase, as much we share these conversations, we have these open conversations, then inshallah we'll take the steps to find these solutions. But I 100% agree. It's out there, it's just getting people to engage. So there's one question about domestic violence. I mean, there should be no place for it. These are my personal views. There should be no place for it. The Prophet never struck a woman, a child, or someone that served him. Never. If anybody's going through domestic violence, personally I think it should be flagged, especially if there's kids involved. 100% think it should be flagged. It cannot be ignored. So the ways of doing it is, you could try local imam, especially for mediation. You could go see your GP. It's something that they deal with. Every community has a domestic violence support group. Again, another one that I'll let you Google. If you Google domestic violence Blackburn support, something will come up, guarantee you. Certainly is where I live. And they have support groups, but it's something that should be addressed, because what happens is and it doesn't just happen to women as well, you know that, don't you? Like, 1 in 5 men experience domestic abuse. Men just don't talk about it because they're worried that they're seen as less of a man. But the risk is that obviously children shouldn't see that, but the risk is that, well, what commonly happens is that children end up getting hit as well. Getting in the middle of the firing line, basically. Should definitely not be ignored. So there's a couple of avenues: the imam for mediation, ulama, elders in your family, GP, domestic violence support groups. It shouldn't be ignored, in my opinion. Well, they're the 3 ways. All the men are quiet here.
Also, I mentioned there's leaflets on the 2 exits for mental health.
You can do it, bro. You can do it. There's leaflets? What is there?
That advice for mental health support, things like that, where you can reach out.
Did you hear that, yeah? Gee.
Just want to ask, how would you deal with people who are engrossed in drug overuse?
Yeah.
But their family members claim that he's got something wrong with him, but obviously he's only disclosed his drugs with myself,
Yeah.
not his family members.
Yeah.
And he, for example, he's positive, he just got nothing wrong with him, but he hears voices, doctor's been diagnosed with psychosis, but he says, I've not got psychosis, I know it's mental issue.
Yeah, you can have drug-induced psychosis. You take drugs and you end up with psychotic symptoms. Yeah. So, as in, how do you seek help for him?
How do you tackle that? Or seek help with it?
Is he willing to seek help?
Yeah.
Yeah, simple. So, if he's willing to seek help, Blackburn will have a community drug and alcohol service. He needs to be on a planned reduction program. Most people who go cold turkey withdraw.
But is that doctors help with that?
Yes, yeah, you can go to your GP if you want. You don't need to, but you can if you want. The thing with drugs and alcohol, again, drugs and alcohol isn't the problem. It's not. Usually these people, it's escapism. Something's really, really bothering them, and the only way they can cope is with the drugs and alcohol. Or they're not living their life to their full capacity. See, when you're not living your life for its purpose, real purpose that Allah's given you, you have gaps in your life. And then with those gaps, you want to fill those gaps. And when you fill those gaps, what do you fill them with? Nonsense. Addictive behavior, self-sabotage, just rubbish. But then when you do that, it locks you because they're highly addictive things. So it's about, okay, why don't you find something better to be addicted with, bro? That's why I tell my patients, look, what do you want out of life? You know that question nobody asks themselves, what do you want out of life? And then it starts, well actually I want this, I want this, I want that. And then you say, okay, well how much do you think it helps you reaching your goals in life through drugs that you take? Everyone will say 0. And when you open that bit of their brain up, what do you want out of life?
So advising anyone to go cold turkey and just get Allah is the wrong way to go about it.
Yeah, because they'll withdraw. They'll withdraw. And you know, honestly, right, again, these are my own observations. There is no more, the most powerful force that Allah's given us is love. It's one of the most powerful forces that will convince anybody to do anything. You know when a man is in love with a woman, they behave pagal, don't they? I'll do anything but her, right type thing. But that concept is like universal. When somebody knows that actually somebody loves me unconditionally and they're with me to the end, even if it's my best friend, that's probably the one thing that's going to save them. So with enormous amount of pyar and muhabbat, and looking at it from an angle of, I just want good for my friend. And then that friend will recognize very, very quickly that you genuinely care. If you don't want anything from me apart from my well-being, he'll listen to you. He'll listen to you. 100%.
As Muslims, we do believe in the chain of black magic.
Yeah.
So how would you differentiate, psychosis and hallucination? Is it when you see things? So how do you differentiate this is black magic or this is jinn and this is mental health? Because when psychosis, they say, I see things, but it's a similar symptoms that you find in black magic and jinn is also differentiation.
It's a really good question. That's a really good question. Clinically, my brain wouldn't go to jinn first. And the reason why is because, I don't know, is it, over-diagnosed that it's a jinn? I genuinely believe in jinns of 100%, yeah, 100%. But I should, I just heard it so many times, everything's a jinn. Do you know what I mean?
I have people asking me, so what happens is, I don't know whether it's a mental health issue
Or a
it's
jinn,
black,
yeah.
So obviously we refer it to an amin to get it checked out.
Maybe that's the best thing to do, yeah.
And then once it's clear it's not jinn,
Yeah.
then it's a mental health issue. That's it.
Yeah, as long as...
Is it something that you can...
I mean, that's reasonable. There's nothing wrong with that. But as long as the person that you're going to check whether the person's got a jinn or not is reputable and knows what they're doing and is not charging you $1,000, for their services and stuff like that. So I get that. That's reasonable. There's nothing wrong with that. I think what I'm trying to say is that it can't be like default. Jinn bara jadoo chayna bhai. I don't think that should be default. But you're right, it's very reasonable to get it checked out by reputable people.
Could you do that the other way though?
Of course you can.
So check in medically.
Yeah,
first,
of course you can.
and then
Yeah, of course you can.
to discount any
Of course you can.
mental illness.
Yes, yeah, of course you can. I think the key message is don't make it the default and it's nothing else.
Yeah, the symptoms would be, jinnat, when you're possessed, obviously that would be, you know that it's possessed, that it's not mental health, it's some black magic one is a bit, because the black magic symptoms, that'd be similar to mental health, that'd be the hard one.
That's the hard one, yeah. You're right.
Do things and
Yes.
you know that it's not themselves.
Yes, yeah.
So then you think, but it's a jadoo one,
That's the difficult one, yeah.
Because the Prophet when his magic was done, symptoms that he had.
Yeah.
Similar to kind of.
Yes, Sahih.
Just as a,
Yeah, 100%. There's no harm doing both. Just don't make it the default. I think that's the thing. Like, explore both avenues. So you could do it either way. Do the arm in and then see a doctor, and then vice versa, see the doctor, but also go see someone who can check you over.
one more thing as a doctor. If someone does have a gin and you mention it to the NHS and the doctors, is that,
No. So
would they deal with it differently, or
no.
would you mention it to them?
No. Yeah, you should mention it to them, because
Do they believe in it?
they allow your belief in it. If it's something that's deemed as a normal belief in your culture, they won't see it as being you're mad. Does that make sense? A delusion is defined as that something that's out of cultural norms, but part of our tradition is jinn, so they allow it. Yeah. Inshallah. We'll stop there, inshallah. Jazakallah khairan for your time. I hope I didn't offend anybody, because I do when I give these talks. Jeeves.
The last one. Someone's a therapist. If you just tell them.
I'm a therapist. I have a huge list of services in Blackburn. How can I share it to the masjid?
WhatsApp, social media.
WhatsApp and social media, says the masjid.
Or come to masjid office.
Or come to the masjid office. I hope that answers your question. I'm sure they'll be willing to share. But it's really important. See, this is how you get, there's a question here, how can you get the people educated? This is how you do it. So there's a therapist who's listening, mashallah. Yeah, whatever service is there, share it wide, because people just don't know. Inshallah, we'll stop there. Subhanakallahumma. Subhanaka wa bihamdika la ilaha illa anta nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. Jazakallah khairan, brother.